Good evening, everybody. Today we start with day 10 of the reading. From the book, the excerpts that I've been reading from the book, The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael A. Singer. We're in chapter 9, and today's topic, the chapter name, chapter 9, is Removing Your Inner Thorn. It's actually a very, very interesting topic. The way when I read this today, I was wondering what thorn he's referring to, and while I was reading it, it was quite fascinating to read that. So I am going to share with you. It's a lot to do with relationships, actually. It's going to be interesting. So if you're going to be watching, those of you who will join me now, or you may watch the recording later, my request to you is please do leave comments how you're liking these series. The every day's video is there on my profile. I would love to know what your comments are, what you think. All right, so beginning. Who's joined me? I can see some. I can only see numbers. I can't see the names right now. All right. Okay, good to see you here, sweetheart. Good to see you. I don't know who the others are. They haven't yet said anything. They haven't commented. Okay, so chapter 9, Removing Your Inner Thorn. The spiritual journey is one of constant transformation. In order to grow, you must give up the struggle to remain the same and learn to embrace change at all times. It's a very powerful statement he's made here. I'll repeat that. The spiritual journey is one of constant transformation. In order to grow, you must give up the struggle to remain the same and learn to embrace change at all times. One of the most important areas requiring change is how we solve our personal problems. This is such a powerful sentence he's written here, that one of the most important areas requiring change is how we solve our personal problems. Not just that we solve them, but how we solve them. This whole chapter today, Removing Your Inner Thorn, what I sense is on the how we solve our problems, not that we solve them or if we solve them, but how. Real transformation begins when you embrace your problems as agents of growth. So he's bringing in a very different perspective here about problems. Instead of the word problems, which seems very difficult, which seems very challenging, which always has this thing that there has to be a solution to it and we have to search for the solutions, he's looking at them and calling them as agents of growth. So real transformation begins when you embrace your problems as agents for growth. So he gives a very interesting example over here. He says, imagine you have a thorn in your hand. Okay, and every time, and the thorn touches a nerve. It's touching a nerve directly. Hey, Deepali, you're here too. So good, thank you. So he talks about this example that, let's say there's a thorn in your hand and it's touching a nerve. So every time, it is touched, the thorn is touched, it's extremely painful. Now, it hurts a lot and it's a serious problem. Okay, and it's when we attempt to take it out, it hurts a lot. So what do? We let it be there, and then we start, in case we choose to not, because we can't bear that pain, we start going through this process of trying to avoid using that hand getting touched by anything else. Okay, we may not let people come close to us, or we may walk very carefully. We may change clothes very, very carefully. Even while sleeping, it's a big problem and things like that. But we are trying whatever we can to avoid that hand getting brushed anywhere, so that the thorn doesn't get, rubbed, and then it doesn't hurt. So the first choice is to look at your situation and decide that since it's so disturbing when things touch the thorn, you need to make sure nothing touches it. There's a second choice, okay, is that you take it out. What he says here is that the effects of the choice, whichever one, the first one or the second one, whichever one you take, that determines the course of the rest of your life. Okay, now that's obviously the thorn one is an analogy, it's an example that he's giving, but for the rest of your life, for however long you wish to carry the thorn with you, if you're going to keep it, it determines the rest of however long you're going to keep it, or if you remove it, it also depends then how the rest of your life is going to be. This is one of the core level structural decisions that lay the foundation for your future. Let's begin now. What he's done is that he goes into a little more depth about this example of a thorn. Obviously, the whole chapter is named Thorn. Hey JT, hi. So he's giving that example, continuing to use the example of a thorn. He says, let's begin with the first choice and explore how it will affect your life. It's he says that, like I was explaining earlier, that if we decide to keep that thorn, okay, then it becomes the work of a lifetime to protect the hand which has the thorn from getting touched anywhere. Okay, like I gave an example, you will start avoiding people coming close to you. You will start reducing using that hand, and as a precaution so that it doesn't hurt you. Then he continues over here saying that, let's say you're now trying to go to sleep, and then you realize that, okay, even while turning, it's getting in once you've fallen asleep, you don't realize that it's hurting you. So then he says, he expands in a very interesting, imaginative way this example, that you build a contraption where it's covered the hand completely, so that now no matter how you turn and things like that, that thorn is not getting disturbed. It's a huge big contraction you've made, so that no matter how you move your hand and things like that, the thorn is not going to get touched, and you're not going to feel the pain. The thorn is still there, but you've built a contraption around it. And then you start walking around and moving around and living your life, and then you realize, okay, you have this big contraption around your hand, so you need to make adjustments to your clothes, you need to make adjustments to the way you move around and things like that. But somehow you've made adjustments, you've made things, made more changes around in your life, so that that contraption becomes part of your whole movement. And then he continues saying, okay, and then all of that is going well, everything is good, hunky-dory with the contraption, you're walking around, now the thorn is not bothering you in your hand. And then you fall in love, he says, okay? And now when you want to hug that person, you're not able to hug that person because you have this contraption in your hand, okay? So now again you start making changes around that contraption, and then again you make something even bigger, so that now you're able to hug the person also, and that person is trying to figure out how to hug you back with your larger contraption that's taking so much more space. So he goes on, what he's trying to do through this example is that you are not looking at the problem, which is the thorn in your hand. What you're doing is you are to avoid the pain that the thorn is causing, and if you try to remove it, it's going to cause so much pain. So you're letting it be there, but you're making all kinds of adjustments outside of you so that the thorn doesn't get touched. right? So that's the example that he's going on elaborating. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is the gist of what he's talking about, okay? And then you ultimately say, I've solved my problem. I'm a free being. I can go anywhere I want. I can do anything I want. This thorn used to run my life, now it doesn't run anything. The truth is, the thorn completely runs your entire life. It affects all your decisions, including where you go, whom you're comfortable with, and who's comfortable with you. It determines where you're allowed to work, what house you can live in, and what kind of bed you can sleep on at night. When it's all said and done, that thorn is running every aspect of your life. It turns out that the life of protecting yourself from your problem becomes a perfect reflection of the problem itself. If you don't solve the root cause of the problem, but instead attempt to protect yourself from the problem, it ends up running your life. You actually feel that because you've minimized the pain of the problem, you've solved the problem. But it is not solved. All you did was devote your life to avoiding it. Okay? So he continues elaborating that example. I'm going to jump to some more key points that I have chosen here. So, and he continues, you have the same two choices with these inner thorns. What are those inner thorns? Anything that's hurting, anything that's painful, any kind of heavy energy, anger, frustration, confusion, and sadness. And he's even talked about loneliness over here, which I'll come to that later. So these are also like inner thorns. If you have the same two choices with these inner thorns as you did with the thorn in your hand, surely it was obvious that you would have been much better off taking out that thorn. There's no reason to spend your life protecting the thorn from getting touched when you can just remove it. It just hurts for a little while you're removing it, but once it's out, you're free to move your hand. You don't have to make a lot of adjustments outside to protect your hand getting touched anywhere. So similarly, that's what he's suggesting, like we've been talking about in all the previous chapters, that the moment you feel an energy getting blocked inside, address it, release it, rather than keeping it, and then you live your life trying to avoid situations that can trigger those emotions. That's what he's talking about here. The same is true with your inner thorns. They can be removed. But if you choose to keep them without being disturbed by them, you must modify your life to avoid the situations that would stir them up. If you're lonely, you must avoid going to places where couples tend to be. If you're afraid of rejection, you must avoid getting too close to people. When you're lonely, you find yourself pondering what to do about your loneliness. What is it that you can say or do in order to not feel so lonely? Notice that you aren't asking how to get rid of the problem. You're asking how to protect yourself from feeling it. I'm going to read those two statements again so that you can tell the difference. We can understand that we're not, how we're trying to figure out how to get rid of the problem, or we're asking to protect ourselves from feeling lonely. Okay? When you're lonely, you find yourself pondering what to do about your loneliness. What is it that you can say or do in order to not feel so lonely? How can I keep myself busy? What can I do about it? How can I find a partner? Or things like that, so that you don't feel lonely. But what if we can look inside, is that where is this loneliness coming from? What is the root cause of that? We don't do that. We don't address that, because that will bring up a lot more. But what we've been talking about throughout in this book is, for once, go to that root cause and get to that point, what has started this feeling of loneliness, rather than continuing to live life not to feel lonely, keep doing things outside. You have not removed the root of loneliness. The problem will be back the moment the external situation fails to protect you from what's inside. Okay? Should you find someone who manages to diminish the feeling of loneliness, this is extremely important. Please listen to this. if you do find someone who manages to diminish the feeling of loneliness, you will then begin worrying about keeping your relationship with this person. Then you start worrying, is this person going to be there in my life? What can I do to keep this person in my life? If this person leaves, I will be back to feeling lonely. So then you start hanging on to that. Okay? The minute you allow the core problem to stay, it expands out into multiple problems. You worry about what people think of you because that could affect your feeling of loneliness or need for love. You now have this burden of worrying about the relationship. It creates an experience of underlying tension and discomfort, and it can even affect your sleep at night. Okay? People end up using their relationships to hide their thorns. If you care for each other, you are expected to adjust your behavior to avoid bumping into each other's soft spots. And that is not being authentic, then, is it? I'll read that sentence again. Please listen to this one very, very carefully and understand. If you've been doing this in any relationship, look at it. People use relationships to hide their thorns. If you care for each other, you are expected to adjust your behavior to avoid bumping into each other's soft spots. So you realize, you have a thorn, you also realize where the other person's thorns are. So you avoid situations with that person so that your thorns don't get poked. You also avoid situations where the other person's thorn doesn't get poked. And you're constantly living in that limited space sharing with each other. Where are you being authentic with each other? Where is the freedom to just be yourself then? And then you start feeling very, there's no movement, there's no freedom of movement in that relationship. This is what people do. They let the fear of their inner thorns affect their behavior. Ultimately, if there is something disturbing inside of you, you have to make a choice. You can look deep within yourself to the core of your being and decide that you don't want the weakest part of you running your life. And that weakest part, what does he mean by weakest part here? The part that is afraid. He's not talking about it in terms of a weakness in a bad way. It's only that he's talking about it because there's a part of you that's afraid of something. So that's the weakness that he's talking about, not in terms of being weak in any negative or judgmental or critical way. Okay? So you can look deep within yourself to the core of your being and decide that you don't want the weakest part of you running your life. You want to have relationships with people because you genuinely like them, not because you You want to have relationships with people because you genuinely like them, not because you need for them to like you. How do you free yourself? You permit the disturbances to come up. Just go through them. That's all. Chapter after chapter after chapter, he is repeating the same thing, and I'm also going on saying the same thing. Stop avoiding your emotions. If they're coming up, look at them. Don't get drawn into them. Look at them, experience them, deal with them, but don't get drowned into them. Okay? If you want to be free of these energies, you must allow them to pass through you instead of hiding them inside of you. If you haven't watched my episode, my recording or my live yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I was sharing with you that I made my younger daughter go through this exercise. She was holding on to a lot of sadness inside her, and I just made her experience that. So go ahead and listen to that. How in a matter of half an hour she was feeling better, and it isn't temporary. Even today she came up and said, Mama, you know what? I have those memories. I intentionally brought up those memories to see how I'm feeling, and I don't feel that heaviness inside me anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm laughing and I'm enjoying remembering those memories now. Rather than having a sadness of missing them, I'm able to enjoy those memories. That's a 14-year-old child saying that. Okay? If the 14-year-old child can have the courage to look at those hurtful feelings and then experience the release just like that, and then see the lasting effects, I'm sure we as adults can also do it. It's just conditioning of not addressing the fear, that's all. If you want to be free of these energies, you must allow them to pass through you instead of hiding them inside of you. Maintain your center. You can learn to appreciate and respect even the difficult experiences. It's a very lovely example that he gives here. Some of the most beautiful poetry and music have come from people who were in turmoil. Great art comes from the depth of one's being. You can experience these very human states without getting lost in them or resisting them. And then he says, be an explorer. Awareness does not fight. Awareness releases. If you sit within the self, you will experience the strength of your inner being even when your heart feels weak. And that's it. It was a small chapter today, but I think it was an extremely powerful message that he's conveyed from today's chapter of removing your inner thorn. So we come to the end of chapter 9, and tomorrow we will move into chapter 10, stealing freedom from your soul. Stealing freedom from your soul. Wow, very, very, very intriguing topic it is. I haven't read it yet. I shall do that tomorrow and then share it with you. 10 p.m. tomorrow, Indian Standard Time. Thank you for joining. Please remember to leave your comments if you like them. If you have questions, I would love to take them up with you and discuss them further. You can put them here on Facebook over here, or you can message me separately. But thank you for joining. Good night. Love you. We have Sai, Sindhuri, and Archana. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.